with projects like the Sanctuary or Combi Shelter in Haiti, it's this moment where we just say we're creating these structures to house these things that we care about. And what we care about is people working together, people coming together after a catastrophe, people interrupting cycles of violence and trying to replace them with cycles of compassion and care.
Orbiting 250 miles above, the space station provides us with the ultimate view of planet Earth. From this perspective, we ask our guests to engage with 6 questions that orbit around wonder and stories of hopefulness. For the next few minutes, this is our Wonderspace.
Welcome to the 135th episode of the Wonderspace Podcast. My name is Steve Cole, and over the past 3.5 years, I have asked the same 6 questions to amazing people from around the world. Questions that orbit around wonder and stories of hopefulness. We started during the COVID lockdown to remind everyone that alongside crisis and emergency are always mind-blowing wonders and hopeful stories that have the potential to expand our minds and hearts and energize us even in the most challenging of times. Before I introduce our guest this week, here is a 1-minute wonder from our friends at Ask Nature, who are part of the Biomimicry Institute.
The malleefowl has adapted to the arid environment of southern Australia through an extraordinary nesting behavior. The birds start by digging a large pit, which they fill with leaves and then cover with soil. The organic material begins to ferment, producing heat, which is crucial for warming the eggs buried within the mound. The true ingenuity lies in the bird's ability to regulate the temperature of the mound meticulously. In the cooler season, they focus on adding soil to insulate the mound and retain heat. As the season progresses and external temperatures rise, the task shifts from primarily generating heat to dissipating it. The bird cleverly opens parts of the mound to allow excess heat to escape. This active management helps maintain a stable thermal environment, essential for the successful development of the eggs.
This week on Wonderspace, we head to Brooklyn and ask our 6 questions to Caledonia Curry, also known as Swoon. Callie is a contemporary artist and filmmaker who became widely known as the first woman to gain large-scale recognition in the male-dominated world of street art. Her work can be frequently seen in streets worldwide and has also been showcased in renowned art institutions. Callie is also the founder of the Heliotrope Foundation, which helps communities respond and heal after natural disasters and other urgent social crises. They believe that the creative process can and should be part of how we heal, rebuild, and move forward. They have developed collaborative multi-year projects in places like Braddock and Philadelphia, New Orleans, and Haiti. I hope you enjoy these next few minutes with Callie. Callie, it's great to have you on board a Wonderspace orbit today. As someone whose art and creativity and compassion has inspired and impacted so many people around the world, I'm really excited to dive into our 6 questions that we've asked many people over the past 4 years or so. So firstly, from this imaginary window seat on the space station, so imagine yourself 250 miles above Earth with this panoramic overview of Earth. Our first question is, if we could do a fly past over any part of the world that is significant to you, which place, city or country would it be and why?
Gosh, it's funny. I guess I should just give the first answer that pops into my head, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
the where I went in my mind was I went into the backyard of my childhood home and kind of just to my whole neighborhood that I grew up in Florida. I grew up at the end of a dirt road in Florida, and, it was like a very working class neighborhood that was very kind of rough, in that way. It was also really fun and really chill and very neighborly, but it was kind of all the things, redneck, very redneck. And I've been working for years on trying to make this movie, and the movie's actually going to be set in the backyard. So I'm kind of building out the sets and things in the backyard. So I think part of my heart is like quite still there, but it's not just in the film and in the sets. It's also just like in the South, in Florida, in like the manatees that are like, we're every year struggling to protect, in like the Spanish moss that's like, dangling from everything, in the kind of way that like the kind of tension of Florida as this wildly swampy place that everyone's always trying to tame, and like good luck with that,
Yeah, a great start. So Callie, I am blown away by all that you do, and so I know to try and define your story into 4 minutes or so is going to be a massive challenge, but Callie, we ask everybody to give us a glimpse into your life story so far, with an emphasis on what you are doing currently.
Yeah. Woo! Okay, my life story. So I am, in fact, somebody who believes a lot in wonder and in joy. Like that really is part of why this grabbed me so much. But I am an artist, and as an artist, I'm somebody who loves to just look at a situation and go, really? Are you sure? And then start digging into it.
Yeah.
And being like, how can this be either more just or more fun or more ridiculous or more beautiful or more cooperative, or anything where you're like, something isn't happening here. Something isn't right. Something could be more. I often find a way to kind of use creativity to like go into a situation like that and like turn the soil and see what's needed. And so I've done that a million times over the years in different projects. And yeah, like I said, right now I'm working on films, and I'm writing like fairy tales. It's a very odd, I'm having like I find like as a creative person, I have this quite unruly muse that's kind of like a funny little elf that like lives in my head, that is totally in charge, gives me no say in what's happening, and like really is weird and unpredictable. Like one year it's like, we're building rafts, and this year it's like, we're writing fairy tales, and I'm just like, okay, along for the ride.
That's so good. So just go into a bit of detail as to one or a few of the projects that kind of has really been a foundation for you in your life, that kind of something of the starting point, and then where it evolved into. And I'd love you to loop Heliotrope into that as well. That'd be amazing.
Yeah. So let me see. So the foundation project for me was this series of street pace stops that was very much that, thing of like starting out just, putting things up in public space illegally, and then going, oh, why is it illegal for citizens to participate in the public walls of their city? And whose walls are these and why? And is there a public space? Is there a public domain? What does it mean when we have a public domain? What do we do with it? All that stuff. And then I think in a funny way, pasting up on the walls of the city actually evolved into projects like, well, actually, maybe let's build our own structures, or let's work to save this structure from being bulldozed, and then let's reinvent what can happen inside it. So to circle that back to Heliotrope, one of the other really foundational projects of my life is this project. It's now called The Sanctuary, and it's now being led by a woman named Rana Davis. That's her project. But when I started it, I was shown by actually John Fetterman, who just won the Senate a little while back, was calling artists to try to help with this kind of crisis in this town, and kind of talked me into like getting involved in this building and essentially buying this building. And then I worked for over 15 years with different, people, collaborators and community there, to sort of slowly save this building from demolition in ways that involved the community each step of the way, always knowing like one day the true purpose of this building will be will show itself. And it was like such an act of faith, because it really bogged down. There was a lot of failure. Like there was moments where people were like, what are you doing? And I really had to keep the faith and be like, no, I will not let this end before it's right. And what is right it's coming. And what was so amazing about that, sorry, I know I'm like talking so long, but anyway, what was so amazing about that was that from the time that I bought the building and worked with my original collaborators to try and save the building, until the moment when I met Rana Davis and transitioned the building to Rana, the amount that I had to learn in between, from the start till the end, we couldn't have done what we did at the beginning. We didn't know enough. The world was different, But then all these years later, I did all these projects working around my own family's history with trauma and addiction and incarceration. And I also looked at my own family's history of participating in enslavement. So the need to create reparations from people who have families like mine, or just white people in the U.S. in general, who have sort of, taken part in the creation of this system of inequality for generations. And so I was asking myself all these questions at the same time. How can we stop cycles of intergenerational addiction, trauma, and violence? And also, how can I take responsibility for my own family's history? And right at this moment, my friend said, hey, there's this woman named Rana Davis. She's an amazing leader in the Black community. And her entire work is around people coming out of incarceration, homelessness, drug addiction. She's like, her whole work is about stopping cycles of trauma. And I was like, holy shit. Like, I never would have even seen this back then, but this is it. And she's the kind of person that people believe in, speaking of building someone, people just get behind her because she means what she says, and she does what she says she's going to do, and she's passionate and she's loving. And so I became one of those people that got behind her, and I donated this church to her. We ran a whole campaign about it, and we fixed the roof, we fixed the windows, and now she's like underway to open the community space very soon. And she's also going to be housing for folks coming out of prison. It's going to host all kinds of meetings, and she's just on the ground every day, like making sure that people don't fall through the cracks of the system.
Yeah, that's amazing. Callie, I listened to one of your conversations to camera on the train this morning on my way into London, and about one of Donia's paintings, which I thought was a stunning little 5 minutes video. But towards the end of that piece, you said something which really stood out for me, which was one of the highest functions of art is to be a vessel of empathy, which I think you've modeled brilliantly well. But can you unpack that a bit more for me, and what that really looks like for you as an artist?
Yeah. It's funny because when I first had that thought, it was a little bit of a wooey thought, because I was drawing this portrait. I mean, maybe that's not surprising. Maybe it sounds quite wooey, but at the moment I was drawing this portrait and I was carving these lines, and I just had this feeling when I was carving the lines, like I was like, what happens is you're creating a channel for the light to pour through, right? Mm-hmm. You're hitting it here, hitting it here, hitting it here. And if you do it right, the light flows through in such a way, and then all of a sudden you see a human and you see their life, and you're like, that's sort of a magic trick if you can get it. You know what I mean? And so I had this feeling where I was like, I'm trying to take this thing, and I'm just quite literally trying to form it into a vessel that's going to hold this experience. And that experience will be you connecting with another human being. And so I just kind of said that. But I think, as I started to think about it more, I also thought about it when you talked about, this podcast. It's like this thing where what we multiply in the world, we are affecting the world in that way. And so I think that with projects like the Sanctuary, or Combi Shelter in Haiti, it's this moment where we just say, we're creating these structures to house these things that we care about. And what we care about is people working together, people coming together after a catastrophe, people interrupting cycles of violence and trying to replace them with cycles of compassion and care, right? And that you set down your, you get your tools, and you make your space, and you say, this is what gets housed here. And maybe you just have one dot on a map, and you never feel like it's enough, but lucky for you, you're not the only one doing it.
Yeah, that's so good. Callie, is there a vision that is brewing, that is crackling right now, which is bringing you a bit of life and sleepless nights for your head of fundraising?
Yeah. Right now, so I do this thing where I kind of have to alternate back and forth, where I'll kind of work on very large scale kind of community projects, and then I need to sort of bring it back and be like, who's in here? Who's driving, and also kind of feed that creative well. And so what I am doing right now is, like I said, kind of following this mischievous little elf who's in fairy tale mode. And the thing that happened for me is so continuing to go around this question of how do we heal, right? And so like when I was a kid, my mom had a very intense psychotic breakdown. And it was, pretty PTSD inducing. I repressed the memory. I had all kinds of stuff going around it. So when I became an adult and I started doing therapy around it, I discovered this like kind of magical thing, which is that there's a part of my psyche that only speaks fairy tale. Like, she's not going to listen when you read the psychology textbooks. She doesn't care about this, that, and the other. But if you're like, once upon a time, there was a witch, she can listen, right? And like, I was like, I bet that this is not just me. I bet that there are a lot of people that like, this is one of our primary languages. It's one of our archetypal languages. Yeah. And so I wrote this original fairy tale called The Sibilant Sisters. And it's about this moment of, kind of understanding my mom and trying to, put that moment into perspective. And then I was struggling with some other things in my life, kind of essentially like, I don't know how to describe it, but just some sort of trauma stemming, in how I love in relationships, essentially like love and sex addiction kind of, trauma, that sort of love trauma. And I wrote another fairy tale, and it was another one of those moments where I was like, oh my God, like some little fallen down, like, toy in my heart, like couldn't get righted until I talked to it in this language. And so that's what I'm doing right now, is sort of writing these stories and then figuring out how do they get out into the world. Maybe I'm working on a book, I'm working on an Oracle deck, I'm working on some film stuff. Like it's like it's a whole weather system is brewing, and I'm trying to figure out how to bring it into the world.
Brilliant. Callie, our third question is, where on earth is your place of reset or recharge?
It's in Panama. I have a place. And so there's a house that I go to and I surf. So when my mom and dad passed away, they passed away pretty close to one another, almost 10 years ago now. And when that happened, I very nearly lost my mind. And when I very nearly lost my mind, a little voice spoke up and said, "You will go surfing now. That no choice. I don't care if you're broke. I don't care if you don't have time. I don't care what's happening. You're going to go somewhere and you're going to sit your ass down and you're going to go in the ocean every goddamn day and you're going to let it toss you around and you're going to let it humble you and you're going to let it bring all the emotions out of your body, and then you're going to let it bring you to just ecstatic joy of riding these waves. And that's how you're going to find your humanness again." And so I do that every year now.
That's amazing. Around that reset and recharge, like when you enter a place like Haiti after it's been decimated by an earthquake, in that emergency context, what do you do there to look after yourself?
Snorkel.
Here we go.
Very tangible answers. No, this was real. When we were in Haiti, we were losing our minds. Especially the first trip was very long. It was very exhausting. And, it was, even though we were out of the epicenter of the trauma, it was still really stressful for everyone. And, I'm an ocean person, but I had never really weirdly snorkeled because Florida doesn't have a lot of coral. So we go to the beach and I look under and I go like, ew, like, whoa, what is that weird junk? I was like kind of freaked out. And then I saw like a guy with a mask and I was like, please, I borrow for 2 seconds. And I looked under the water and I almost burst into tears with how much I needed a mask. Luckily, somebody was getting on the plane the next day. We messaged him, please, I'll give you anything. Just bring me a snorkel mask. And then I would do that. I would go to the beach once a week and I would go for hours. And it was the way to not be in the disaster. I could just go through the water and I would float and you don't hear any sounds and you're just following these little creatures around, exploring this underwater world. And it was the way that I could leave and be in wonder. I could be in that state of wonder that refreshes.
Yeah, so good. And that probably is a runway into our next question, which is, what wonder of the natural world excites you the most? Previous guests have taken this in destinations and contexts. But for you, Callie, what wonder of the natural world excites you the most?
Consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay, so so when my mom died, she passed through my body, and there was light, and there was love, and there was these patterns and shapes, and there was her voice. And I was in Istanbul, and she was in Florida. And I woke up, and I had just tears were covering my face. And I said, that was my mom. My mom just died. And I just waited for my sister to call, and she did. And then I was like, I would start to tell people this thing happened to me, and I would see this look go in their eyes, and they would be like, wow, I didn't know that you were entirely off your rocker. That was kind of the look they would give me. And I was like, am I? Like, what is this? You know, and I became really curious to try to investigate it as scientifically as possible, because I didn't want to be unhinged. I had this experience was real. I wanted to understand this, you know? And what I came to learn is that, just consciousness, first of all, there's no real proof that it's materially generated by the brain. Like, we have proof that the brain is, like, at the very least a receiver, but, like, that it is just entirely generated by the brain. Like, it's called, like, the hard problem of whatever. Like, nobody has actually proven this. So I just have continued to kind of explore these different experiences that I have with my own consciousness, which are like kind of, impossible, these kind of impossible kinds of experiences. And I just find it to be so magnificent and beautiful and unpredictable and squirrely and weird. And like, and you get into it, and you get into, like, I think it was Max Planck maybe being like, oh, everything is consciousness. Like, you get down that rabbit hole where even the more scientific you try to get, that you get people that are essentially, just going mystical again. The loop, the snake starts to eat its tail, the loop just comes right back around.
Yeah.
And so I think that the sense that there's like this like thrumming, humming force that forms all things, like that's where my wonder resides. It's also like in the fact that manatees will come up and try to snuggle you. Like that's, but somehow even that is contained within this bigger sense of wonder of consciousness.
That's so inspiring. Callie, our fifth question takes the focus onto promoting someone else. And we've just found over the years there's so much treasure and possibility that opens up when we promote others. So our question is, Callie, what is your story of hopefulness that's not your own, about a person, business or non-profit who are doing amazing things for the world? So who would you love to give a shout out to today?
Yes, this is wonderful. I feel, I was telling you before, literally the second I picked up my phone, the first thing I saw, like the second before I got on here, was this woman that I love. She just inspires me so much. And her name is Roz Pichardo. And she is a woman who has been through more in her life than any person should have to go through. And she's one of those people that has taken that like a lion. She has turned it into this fucking ferocity that's love. It's love in action. When love is fierce and fearless and tough. And so I worked with her in Philadelphia in the center of the opiate crisis. And I had never seen any place like this. It was one of the scariest places I'd ever been. And I'm a New Yorker. I've been a New Yorker for almost 30 years now, right? But like, people are dying. It's one of the most desolate places. And there's Roz, and she's out there, and she calls every single person sunshine. Hey, sunshine. Hey, sunshine. And she's got a smile for everybody. And she just started volunteering at this place. So Philly Mural Arts started this center. It was this arts community center. And Roz showed up and she started volunteering. And everybody was like, man, Roz is the real deal. And she just continued to be there with this really grounded compassion. And she's continued to work in that neighborhood, absolutely dedicatedly for years. And then she just started her own place called the Sunshine House. And it's one of those things where it's just like, yes, like if her ethos, if her spirit can become embodied in a place that's like out there helping people, that's like the best news I've heard all day.
Wow. And you've just come across that recently, or has that been a story you've been tracking for a while?
Well, I've been tracking it, but I would have forgotten about it. That's why I just like, I love that kind of coincidence where I would have been like, oh, let me talk about, XYZ, whatever. But just the fact that I picked it up and was like, oh my God, it started. Like, I was so excited to be like, it opened, like it opened this week. It's so cool,
Amazing. That's so good. Callie, this has been such an inspiring orbit. So as we draw our time to a close and prepare to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, our question is, what insight, wisdom, or question would you like to leave with us?
So the thing that's like popping to my mind, well, the first thing that popped to my mind is sort of like about curiosity and about the sense that like, I think we know this. This is like a trope for a reason, that like if you can remain at the point of curiosity, your whole life is going to have a different feel to it. And, it's like, that's why, kids, that's why like the powerful kind of magic of childhood is so special. But it's also like what the Buddhists say when they're like, oh, you're suffering and you've got this story in your head and you're, running, chewing your tail in circles about, and you're finding the answer and yada, yada. But like, if we can, and we can't always, like I've just been in a space in the last couple months of being really, really upset about something and kind of studying the psychology of certain psychological disorders and this and that, and like really kind of needing to like understand some things. But just today I'm like, oh, right. Like, don't forget that like the moment you can kind of like step back from that and actually return to like genuine curiosity, what you're open to hearing and seeing and experiencing is going to be so different than when you're driving for the answer, right? And we can't always be there because it's like, it does take a certain amount of safety, of feeling safe, of feeling grounded, of feeling like I can be open to whatever answer emerges. And so I think there's that. And also I just read this quote, another that I loved this morning, and it was from somebody in, a therapist. And he was like, if you want to make the world a better place, start by making people feel safer.
Yeah.
I loved that.
That's so good. And Callie, to find out more about you and your work, where is the best place to find out more information?
Let's see. Well, I have a website. It's like swoonstudio.org.
Great.
I'd say that's probably the good place, and that'll lead you in a few other directions.
Thanks again, Callie, for helping us to re-wonder today and for your willingness to pursue radical empathy and compassion. We're so blown away and so grateful. So thanks so much for this.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for doing this. I really feel that thing that you guys are amplifying, something that we really need in the world by doing what you're doing. So thank you.
Links to Swoon and the Heliotrope Foundation can be found on her website page at ourwonder.space. I finish with a question. What is your hopeful story that's not your own, about a person, business or non-profit who are doing amazing things for the world? A story that makes a name for someone else. Thanks for listening.